And welcome back to Ohio Wesleyan University in Delaware, Ohio. I'm Rob Schmidt. The Republican primary is set for May 3rd. Early voting has already begun in this state. Ohio, of course, a key battleground state for the upcoming midterm election. Candidate for Governor Jim Renacci is our guest tonight. We've also invited the incumbent candidate, Republican Governor Mike DeWine of the state of Ohio. He has declined to join us tonight. Of course, Ohio is a critical swing state in presidential elections. No Republican nominee has ever won the White House without winning this state. It's a state that Trump carried twice, so the leadership of this state is obviously very important. And as we bring in Mr. Renacci, good to have you on tonight, sir. We appreciate you coming on. My first question is, this is a state that's already led by a Republican governor. Why is it that this state would do better under your leadership?
Well, Rob, it's run by a Republican governor, but it's really, he's been running it like a Democrat governor. Okay. So it makes it pretty simple. If you look at what he did, he ran the state like Cuomo. When it came to lockdowns and shutdowns, he was right there with New York and California. He was one of those that right out of the gate said, we're going to shut things down, we're going to pick winners and losers, all the things that you were hearing out of New York. And then what made it worse is he was on TV with CNN and Cuomo laughing about it too often. So if you look at his policies, we're really not running as a Republican state. We're running more of a Democrat state. More of a Democrat state.
And I heard those stories about the lockdowns, and obviously, when you look back on it now, you realize how different your lives could have been if you had spent a couple years in Florida versus a couple years in Ohio.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's a dramatic difference. Your home values would have gone up, your businesses would have done better. It's staggering. You personally, a life in business, successful businessman, you jump into politics. What was the reasoning?
Well, look, I came here 39 years ago, started my first business with just a couple $100. Went from one business to 60 businesses, created over 1,500 jobs, employed over 3,000 people. That was my life. And then all of a sudden, the Obama administration took over General Motors. But one day, I got a letter that basically said, you are no longer going to be a General Motors dealer. And I was shocked. I called General Motors, and they had said, look, it's out of our hands. The problem was, it was big government taking control of business. And I really didn't appreciate it. So I called my congressman, because I didn't really know, I didn't even pay attention to Congress. Maybe I should have. Right. But I called my congressman. He came to the dealership. He looked around, talked about all the great things that he can do, went back to Washington. And the problem was, when the vote came to reinstate my dealership, he voted against it. And that was the second kick in the stomach. And that's really, you know, there's so many people think, I want to get into politics. I really didn't want to get into politics, but I wanted to change things. And that's the reason I jumped that race. I'm happy to say that after getting in that race, 14 months later, I became the United States Congressman.
Right, and you took his job.
I took his job.
And I mean, to the crowd out there, I mean, you got to be able to appreciate that, right? And that to me is, when I think about politics, one of the things that bothers me the most is that you see so many of the people that are in Washington now that have turned this into a career. You know, it's like they come right out of college and they start working on their political career. I don't think it was ever designed to be that way. I think it was designed to be just the way you did it. You go out, you contribute to the world, you contribute in the private sector, and then you go into politics to make a difference. And I don't think we see enough of that. I want to switch, and I want to talk for a second about inflation. First big topic we're going to hit tonight, obviously 8.5% inflation year over year, 8.5%. Ohio, a Midwest state, a lot of middle class people that are really struggling under this. And I think the question is, for anybody running for office right now, what can a governor do to help ease that pain?
Sure. Well, look, it's hard for a governor because the problem right now is we got a federal government spending money we don't have. And if you think about it, when I went to Washington in 2010, the national debt was $10 trillion. Today it's $30 trillion. We're spending money we don't have, and of course that's what's driving it up. That's what's driving inflation. What we can do, as far as I believe in Ohio, is try and give some of that, relieve some of that burden. I've said that this governor, the first thing he did when he became governor is he raised the gas tax. And what I have said is, we've gotten so much federal money, let's take that federal money, let's eliminate the gas tax so that hardworking Ohioans get a chance to save a little bit of money, and then let's take the federal dollars that we're getting and replace those dollars. I'm not talking about eliminating those dollars, because I always hear people say, well, wait a minute, that's the money that we use for this, that, or whatever. No, let's take the federal money and use it for that.
We hear, there's a lot of people, go ahead, we hear the gas tax argument pop up a lot. Obviously, everybody pays taxes in general. How much would that save? I mean, if gas is $4 a gallon right now, you take the gas tax away, What does that do?
Well, look, if it's I think it's 36 or 38 cents. It's still something. Right now, people are driving every day, and they need a little bit of a break. So it's a starting point. Instead of taking all that federal dollars and doing Vax-A-Million, we had a governor that had a contest. You get $1 million if you get the vaccination. Why don't we take that money and make sure that businesses and hardworking families are getting that money?
Understood. We're going to go to our first question from an audience member, Sue Ellen King. Sue Ellen?
Hi, my name is Sue Ellen King. I'm from Columbus, Ohio, and I want to ask Jim one question. Have you been critical of Governor DeWine's COVID response? What did he do wrong?
Oh, he did everything wrong. I mean, I hate to say that. He took away our rights, number one. Number two, he didn't work with the House and Senate. Number three, he believed that he was king and that he could do just anything he wanted. He has shuttered 40% of our businesses by not understanding it. Yes, there was a COVID issue, but there's also economic issues. And what we had is a governor who made the decision that he was right. What really bothers me and what I believe I'm going to do different is I'm going to work with the House and Senate. If I do believe there's an issue, then I'm going to get the House and the Senate to also agree with me, not go down this path of thinking I'm king and nobody else answers to me. The other thing he did was he hired a medical director who scared the heck out of us. I can tell you, if you look at what she did, she scared everybody. And that's another thing I would never do. First off, my medical director is not going to stand in front of me. That medical director, he or she, is going to stand beside me. And I think that's important. And in the end, we have to make sure we balance everything. Look, we did have a pandemic, but we also had an economic pandemic that we needed to take care of. The story that I'll never forget, I got a call from a woman out of Worcester, Ohio, who said to me, Congressman, she said, I lost my home and I lost my car. I had COVID. I'd rather have COVID 5 times than lose everything. That's the key. We should not be taking people's lives away from them and affecting them, and that's what this governor did. That's what.
It's an overreach of power. I agree with that. I want to go to schools now and what we're seeing happening in a lot of our schools around the country. Starting in 2021, we've seen what they've called the rise of the school board parents. You had Glenn Youngkin win in Virginia after his opponent effectively said that parents shouldn't really have a say in what their kids absorb in schools, what they're taught in schools. And I think that rubbed a lot of people in Virginia the wrong way, and I'm sure it's very similar here in Ohio. Is this a problem that you're seeing in this state? And if so, how can you fix it?
Well, absolutely. It's a big problem. And again, I got to fall back on Governor DeWine. We have a governor who doesn't talk about it. He appoints 8 school board members who all supported COVID, or CRT, I'm sorry. He all supported CRT and social emotional learning. And, you know.
Was that intentional? I mean, you say he appointed 8 and he's a Republican. That doesn't seem to make a lot of sense.
Well, he appointed a pro-abortion medical director, too. So that's why I said he acted as a Democrat in all these appointments. In the end, we should be appointing people who actually represent the citizens of Ohio. And when I travel this state right now, the parents are in uproar. They want to be part of their education. They do not want CRT pushed down their children's throat. They do not want social emotional learning. They do not want comprehensive sex education taught to kindergartens to 3rd grade, but even 4th, 5th, and 6th graders. That should not be done. And the parents are uprising, but we have a governor who doesn't talk about it. We also
is he out of balance with what your local governments want? I mean, is your state House and Senate, are they against what he believes?
Well, the state House and Senate are pushing some of these things. We got a lot of good House members and Senate members who are trying, but this governor always says, I'm going to veto that. I'm going to veto things. I want to be the governor who says, get me the bill on my desk.
We're going to go to another question from the audience from Meta Han.
Thank you. My name's Meta Han. I'm from Westerville, Ohio, and I'm a retired teacher. And this fits right into your discussion you were just having. Mr. Renacci, how will you remedy the indoctrination in our education system in Ohio? One suggestion is an end to the governor appointments to the State Board of Education, so that it will be a board entirely composed of elected individuals who are accountable to the voters.
Yeah, and I do support that. Look, until that happens, I will always appoint people, or look, it's pretty simple. I've been in business for 38 years. You develop a plan, and then you get people around you that agree, support, and work that plan. So I'm not going to appoint people to the school board who don't agree with my plan. I mean, why would I do that? I'm going to appoint people who believe in the plan, and then my plan is going to be based on what the parents want, what they want for their students, their children, their students. That's got to be the key. So my goal will be to make sure that I appoint those members. But at some point in time, I would sign a bill that said let those 8 people be elected from the communities. That's where it should be. Education should be parent-driven. It should be community-driven.
And we're going to go to one more question from the audience, if she's ready, from Chris Garwood. And Chris, you might have to bring the microphone down just a little bit if you can. There you go.
Hi, I'm Chris
Go ahead,
Garwood from Worthington, Ohio. My question for Mr. Renacci is, what are your plans for improving Ohio's public schools, including both K-12 school performance and high school graduation rates?
Well, for me, look, it's all about competition. I'm a business person. I believe that the best way to fix schools is to get competition in those schools. I think that the answer to that is to make sure that parents have the ability to take their child. The dollars, we talk about backpack bills and all this other stuff. I want to simplify it. I want to be able to say that the dollars follow the child. If the parent wants to send their child to whatever school they want, that money will follow that child. And I think that's important, because once you do that, you now have school systems that are competing. And if a school system can't compete, they're not going to have any kids. But that's competition. That's what should drive our school system. If we do that, we'll have better schools. We'll have schools that compete. We'll have better programs, because now it's going to be parent-based, it's going to be local-based, and it's going to be competitively based.
Thank you.
And on that same topic, how scary is it when you see some of these states? I think we've seen it in Oregon. You're starting to see places like California as well, where they're trying to get rid of some of these requirements. They're saying that, being proficient at math is somehow based in some kind of racism, and you're dumbing down the next generation of kids with no requirements. I mean, it's unbelievable.
It's ridiculous, and what I've seen, we were just at an education forum yesterday, some of the things they're asking the kids to do is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And what I did learn yesterday, because I learn every time when I listen. By the way, I'm going to be a governor who goes out and listens. Yesterday I heard that it doesn't matter what you try and do. If you eliminate CRT, and you eliminate SEL, social emotional learning, and you eliminate comprehensive sex education, you're still going to have teachers who want to teach it. And you got to make sure that we're protecting that situation. And I think we got to make sure that our kids understand what programs are being taught. We've got to have that parent guidance, and that's another issue that we got to fix.
Yeah, and you got to keep merit in the education system, because that leads the way down. Everything that makes this country great is through competition and through open markets, people fighting to get what they want out of this country, and working harder to get more. I mean, if you start taking that away, that's a dangerous road you go down. I want to talk about the drug problem in this country for a second. Obviously, we've seen fentanyl flooding the United States through our southern border. It's a story that we see all the time. It's another cost of a very ridiculous immigration policy from this current White House. It's a problem that's hitting Ohio extremely hard as well, and I think it's something that, in my opinion, is being largely ignored by the people in power in this country. I think it's just another one of those problems where they just say, there's nothing we can do about it. And they just ignore this huge swath of drugs that come into this country, and they don't seem to care. What can you do to fix that problem here in Ohio? I know it's hit hard here.
Well, Ohio's got some #1 statistics that are not good.
Yeah.
Corruption, overdose drug deaths, and addictions. I mean, these are things that we shouldn't be proud of. And when it comes to that, what we have to do is we've got to prioritize it. We have a governor who's not prioritizing that. He prioritizes spending, but we really need to look at what's the cost and why is it coming in. We have 5 sanctuary cities in our state. Think about that. We are bringing people across the border in Mexico, and they're coming to Ohio because we have sanctuary cities. Well, as a governor, one of the first things I'm going to do is whatever I can do to cut the funding to those sanctuary cities from the state government. we should be a sanctuary state of not illegal immigrants. Now look, I also believe legal immigration is a great thing, but you've got to do it legally. So I have promised this time and time again, we can fix this. We got to stop the illegal immigration coming here. We got to stop the drug flow coming here. And at the same time, we got to reprioritize and make sure that our homeless veterans are taken care of, because that's really the people we need to be taking care of.
In a recent interview, you said that under Governor DeWine, Ohio has 5 of the 50 most dangerous cities in this country. In my opinion, there's never been a better time in the United States to be a criminal. They've made it so easy. They've enticed this kind of behavior in so many different ways. How do you get that under control?
Well, first off, you don't defund your police, you fund your police. Yeah. I mean, that has to be a starting point. And then we have to engage our police back into the communities. Look, what
cities did you see defunding in Ohio? Were there any that made that move? That made that move?
Well, there was always talk about it.
Yeah,
there's talk about it. But the problem is that's the mentality. Defund. No, we should fund. And what I believe in, we should take our cities and we should make sure. Look, in the end, the governor can back up a city if it's having problems. When we had the riots and all the break-ins, we had problems at the Capitol, people, destroying our Capitol building, people breaking windows up in Cleveland, people going in to businesses. There's 2 things I would do. Number one, I want to ask the legislature, we have a castle doctrine here where you can protect yourself in your house. I want a castle doctrine to protect yourself in your business as well. I think that's important. And then next, if I'm governor, when people are breaking windows, I'm sending the National Guard in right behind the police. Yeah. I mean, those are the simple things you can do to show that you're standing behind your police. This governor said, well, those kind of riots are part of, I forget the words he used, but it was ridiculous. They're, okay, basically. No, they're not. No, they're not. You have to show people that they can't break the law. And once you do that, you'll start to bring that crime back down to where it should be. But your police have to be part of somebody who you not only admire. I admire the police every day they go out, but at the same time, I believe we need to be standing with them. We need to give them the training. We need to get them out in the community. Are there bad police? Sure, there's bad doctors, there's bad lawyers, there's bad accountants, there's always bad people in every industry. Yeah. But what we got to do is protect the 90% that are good.
Understood. We got a question from Jacob Novotny. Jacob, go ahead.
Hi, Mr. Renacci. Thank you for being here. I'm Jacob Novotny. I live in Westerville, Ohio, and I'm a full-time college student. I know you were the first elected official to endorse then-candidate Trump in 2016 when most others supported the former Ohio governor, John Kasich. Former President Trump is yet to endorse anyone in this race. What would you say to President Trump to earn his endorsement, have him help you win, and further America First, Ohio First policies?
Well, what's interesting is I just talked to President Trump probably 3 or 4 weeks ago on a Saturday afternoon. I still consider him a friend. And you're right. When everybody else was standing behind Governor Kasich, I stepped out in March of 2016 and endorsed candidate Donald Trump. I still remember the day I did that. He said to me, "You're going to be in big trouble when it comes to Governor Kasich." And I said, "You know what? The difference is I want change. I want somebody different. I want somebody who's going to go in and be a disruptor. And that's why I'm supporting you." I'll never forget, I said to him, "I voted for you. My wife voted for you. My kids voted for you. I've gotten you a couple hundred votes." And he really thanked me for that. Now, look, at this stage, I didn't expect the president to endorse in the Senate race, so who knows what's going to happen. He's coming on Saturday. I do believe he realizes that I have his back when it comes to his policies. I'm a big believer in Make America Great policies, Make Ohio Great policies. In the end, if he runs in 2024, he's going to want a Governor Renacci in that seat, not a Governor DeWine who won't even show up. I do think he's going to want somebody that helps him win. So in the end, if he's listening or watching, I hope he realizes that this is the opportunity to have somebody who will stand with him in Ohio, not somebody who will stand away from him. I will add this. What's interesting about Governor DeWine, he has more pictures. He has more pictures with President Biden than he has with President Trump. And I'll be one who will stand with President Trump in 2024 if I am elected.
Thank you.
I want to expand on that a little bit because I think that was one of the most, I think when Trump lost in 2020 and we had these 4 years that I think for half the country was just incredible to see so much change and somebody that operates at some kind of level of, let's get stuff done. Let's actually do stuff rather than just, fiddle around and mess around the way politicians usually do. I mean, they talk about it all the time. We have guests on our show all the time talk about it. They did it in Trump time. We got things done. We like a businessman would. I got to get this done. I need to get it done. You're going to get it done. When we reverted back to what we're seeing now out of Washington, which it's such a staggering difference between what we saw under Trump to go back to just the most old guard Washington kind of regime you've ever seen that's just all run on virtue signaling and no real progress and just kind of peddling constant BS. I mean, I think you see a lot of that. That difference, I think, do you think that invigorates people, that it shows people what kind of track we were on before we fell back into the old way?
I do. I think what happens is people, there were all kind of reasons. I think when COVID came down the path, that probably hurt President Trump.
Yeah.
But I wish people would have just looked at his policies, his positions, where he was taking our country, energy independence. I promise you, Russia would not be invading Ukraine right now. I mean, that's the difference. We would have had a president who said, this is not going to happen. So those are the policies. Too often, and look, I know people who said, I can't vote for President Trump, and I was saying, wow, you got to vote for him. Today, they're coming back and saying, I'm going to vote for him if he runs again in 2024. Yeah. So you see how that pendulum swung. Right. And it's a sad thing about politics because I was in Washington for 8 years. It's always a swinging pendulum. Sometimes it swings slower. I think this time it's swinging back pretty quick. And I do think you're going to see the Republicans taking back the House, the Senate, and hopefully in 4 years, we'll take back the presidency as well. They're going to love the policies. And
you need to vote on policy.
Right. And even if President Trump decides not to run, they will elect somebody who has his same policy. So I hope he does run. I'll support him. But if for some reason he decides not to, we need somebody who's going to have that type of policies as well.
Understood. All right. We're going to take a quick break. More with Jim Renacci coming up after the break. Stay tuned. And welcome back to Ohio Wesleyan University in Delaware, Ohio. I'm Rob Schmidt. The Republican primary is set for May 3rd. Early voting has already begun in this state. Ohio, of course, a key battleground state for the upcoming midterm election. Candidate for governor Jim Renacci is our guest tonight. So I guess one question a lot of people have, it's a question I asked Trump when I interviewed him just a few months ago. I look at somebody that's had good success in the private sector. You got plenty of cash. You don't need this. I mean, why go into this job? I think about politics and how much, palm pressing you got to do, how many events you got to do. It just sounds exhausting. Why do you want to do this so bad?
Well, look, the state of Ohio has been very good to me. I came here with nothing, started one business, as I said earlier, grew multiple businesses. I've been blessed to live the American dream. What I want to do is give back. It's too easy to just take the money and run. I want to give back to the state that gave me that opportunity.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense. What's the best thing about Ohio? If you're explaining Ohio to someone else, what's the best thing about the state?
I tell everybody, we have a great state. We got a beautiful lake to the north, a river to the south. We got 2 theme parks. We got a national park in the center. We got 3 halls of fame. The problem is we don't support it. We don't sell it. We don't make sure people stay here. We're the 7th most left state in the country. But what should be the greatest asset is we have good, hardworking Ohioans, and the cost of living is down.
All right, with that, we're going to go to a question from John Stover. John, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. Congressman Renacci, very brief statement, a couple of questions. Governor DeWine is opposed to Ohio House Bill 61, the Save Women's Sports Act, which would prohibit transgender biological males from competing in women's sports. The governor has said, quote, "This issue is best addressed outside of government." So my question for you, Mr. Renacci, the first one, what is your position relating to transgender biological males competing in women's sports? And number 2, if elected governor, would you sign Ohio House Bill 61?
Sure, it's pretty simple. A biological man should only be able to compete with biological men. There should not be. And that is not something that the governor should not be saying. He should say that. He should step up. We need a governor who leads. One of the reasons why I like my former colleague and friend, Governor DeSantis, is because he does lead. He steps out and says, this is what I believe. And I think that's where we need a governor. The other thing, House Bill 61, I would ask for it to be on my desk. I would ask that bill get on my desk so I can sign it. We should be protecting women's sports, and we should make sure that biological men only compete with biological men's sports. It's that simple.
When you see, I can't believe that this is even that big of a subject in this country at this point. I think if you would have gone back 10 years ago and told the Democrat Party you'd be trying to, push biological men to beat women in women's sports, you'd be okay with that. I mean, when you see the swimmer, Leah Thomas, and you've got this 6'3" former man, and just crushing these girls in sports, and these girls have worked their whole lives to get to that point, to just get dominated by a guy. I can't believe that that's how far this whole country has been shoved to the left. I do feel like we're just moving left and left and left and left. It happens, every generation, every decade, we just move further and further down their direction. And I guess it's because we haven't had anybody standing up on our side.
Well, I would agree with you. And again, it's one of the problems why we need strong governors, because we need governors who say no more to this. And you're right, we're moving so much to the left. I look at the Democrat Party. It is not the party that my mother and father and grandparents grew up in. I mean, it's just not. No. That was the working class party. Now the Republicans are actually the working class party. And Democrats want to push the left woke agenda. Yeah.
I say all the time, my friends, if JFK were a politician today, he'd not only be a Republican, he'd be on the Freedom Caucus. I mean,
I agree with you.
That's how far it's shifted since the 1960s. We're unrecognizable in so many ways.
I agree. No, it's one of those reasons I don't even know why we're talking about it. Can you imagine if LeBron James retires and goes to the Women's Basketball League? I mean, how's anybody going to compete?
Dave Chappelle had that joke, one of his stand-up comedy bits. He said if he goes over, he'll score 1,050 points a game.
Right. Yeah, Dave probably took
Is
it
that
from
okay?
me.
Yeah. He's an Ohio guy, right? I think he's
Right.
from Dayton. Yeah. Politicians think. You have somebody that has, as you say, is a medical director that is pro-abortion, but he's also signing the heartbeat bill, which just throws the left into a tizzy on everything. He's also closing down these clinics. He's a walking contradiction on this issue. What do you make of that?
Well, it's one of the reasons why Governor DeWine should never get elected again, because what he does is he flip-flops depending on what election he's in. He's in a primary now.
Okay.
So now he has signed constitutional carry,
He's
which,
right
by the way,
center,
a year ago, he said, I'm not going to sign constitutional carry. A year ago, he says, I'm not going to sign stand your ground. He signs both of those. But he thinks people are going to forget in 2019, he was trying to push red flag laws and anti-gun laws, and people shouldn't forget that. And then when he couldn't get it done in 2019, thank goodness to our legislature saying it's not going to happen, he put it in the budget in 2020. This guy is a walking flip-flopper. Yeah. He's a guy that is going to flip depending on what election he's in, but he's got a history. If you go back to him in the Senate, he governs the same way. When he's elected, he governs as a Democrat. And I hate to say it because, people say, oh, he's not a Democrat. Oh, no. He governs as a Democrat. And we see it now in the governor's race. It's one of the reasons why I'm running. It's one of the reasons why I'm running. I think people need a choice between a Democrat and a Democrat. They need a Democrat and a true Republican, and that'll be me.
This was supposed to be a debate. This was supposed to be a debate with DeWine here speaking. I mean, I know a lot of times incumbents don't like to do debates because they don't feel like they need to. But in this case, it seems like it's a pretty close race, and he could lose his job. Do you think he made a mistake not coming here tonight and trying to defend these policies, or did he take the only way out?
I think he took the only way out. Look, there's no way he can sit on the same stage with me. There's just no way, because I'm gonna come after him on all these things. Right. He came to one event. I have to Cuyahoga County for an endorsement. They actually set it up for him. The committee, the screening committee, or whatever they called it, they actually came out and said, we recommend endorsing DeWine. He got up and spoke. I got up and spoke. We ended up getting the endorsement. I mean, that's the difference.
I want to talk about spending. It's a subject that I talk about a lot on my show. I feel that this country, we are spending ourselves into oblivion. I say it all the time. I think we're a guy working at McDonald's driving a Ferrari. You know, I mean, we are so completely out of touch with how much money we have, and we're just spending like crazy. Ohio spends twice as much as other states of its size. Ohio spends about the same amount of money as Florida, which is a state that is double its size. Many politicians talk a big game, especially when they're in the primaries, talking about coming in, cutting spending. I'm sure that's something that you want to do as well. But when it comes down to it, nobody ever gets there and really does anything about it, which is why we're $30 trillion in debt. What could you actually do to get your state spending under control? Because I know you guys have a problem.
Well, we have to. I mean, so look, one thing I'm blessed with is that I was able to go into all these businesses that were in trouble. Yeah. And when I got into the business, number one, the first thing is they spent too much. And then the next thing is they didn't account for things. And then the third thing was they never prioritized. Well, guess what? That's Ohio. Ohio, the governor was sitting here, he'd say, I cut the budget. No, we didn't. We went from $76 billion to $80 billion. He didn't cut the budget. He'll say, we cut taxes. No, he didn't. The House and Senate cut taxes. Both of his budgets did not have a tax cut. You can't say you cut spending when you went from $76 billion to $80 billion. The problem is, as you said, we can't compete because we're spending too much. Look, I have a plan. It's on my website. There are opportunities, but we got to get our spending down. You know,
where is that money? Where is that waste of money, that big pile that's getting burned? I know in the federal government it's in Medicaid and Medicare and defense. Where is it in Ohio that needs to be slashed?
So here's a great statistic. Under Governor Strickland, a Democrat governor, which was about 15 years ago, Medicaid spending was 17%. Today, under Governor DeWine, it's 52% of the budget. 52% of the spending. So that's one place. Look, we got to look at a whole bunch of other places. We're a state that's not growing anymore, but we have the same amount of universities, the same amount of school districts. I know people don't like to hear that, but at some point in time, you have to look at that. Now, I'm not saying you cut, but we got to figure out a way to cut that overhead. Yeah. If this is the other thing that scares the heck out of me. In Ohio, 18-year-olds will have the least amount of 18-year-olds ever. Exactly. In the next 10 years. Yet we have the same amount of universities, we have the same amount of high schools. In business, you know what you would say? Wait a minute, we got to start getting our spending down, and we got to come up with a plan. So these
you said 52% of Medicare. I mean, does that drives you to believe? I mean, obviously we have baby boomers. They're all my parents. They're all in that age right now. You have a lot of older people that are all on some kind of a dole. You know, they're on Social Security, they're on Medicare, they're getting money from the government, and we don't have anybody. We don't have nearly enough people paying into it. This is why you hear people like Elon Musk talking about how we need to start having kids. Like we need to get busy creating the next generation of people to pay for all our stuff. Yeah.
Or we have to have legal immigration that works. Both of those things can happen. Legal immigration can work too. But the problem is, even in the Medicaid system, this governor has allowed us billions of dollars of waste in the Medicaid system that's unrecoverable and never get back. He also allowed an unemployment system, which they were warned in 2019 that the unemployment system would collapse if under the slightest downturn. We had a major downturn called COVID, and we lost billions of dollars there. Some of this can just be done by having good people who prioritize things instead of career politicians. The lieutenant governor and the governor totality have about 70 years in the Ohio government. How much longer are we going to give these people? It's time to change. And it's just, so.
Do you think that is it foreseeable to think, in the state that we're in right now in this country, that we're ever going to tackle the debt problem that we're in? I mean, you have an administration right now that's sitting there bragging about cutting the deficit because they spent less than they did last year. It's still dramatically more than we bring in. It's just no longer double what we bring in. I think we bring in about $3.5 trillion. They spent $6 trillion during COVID in 1 year. And so, this year we only spent $4.5 trillion, which is still $1.5 trillion more than, I mean, that's how they manipulate you to think that they're doing something about spending. We're still spending ourselves to hell and back. Are we ever going to get this under control? Can we?
Well, the only way we're going to get it under control is to do two things. First, one of the reasons I left Washington is because I saw a place that cannot be fixed unless you do two things. You got to require a balanced budget, and you got to put term limits in, because the problem is these term limit people, they get so much money, and so once they're in for good, because they build up this money. Now, there are some that leave, but 97% of incumbents get reelected. That's the hurdle I have. I'm up against an incumbent. But Bad incumbents get beat, and we see that all the time. But I don't think we can fix it unless we fix those two things. We have to have a balanced budget amendment, and we have to do term limits. If you do that, you can fix Washington. That's the other reason why I believe governors need to step up. I know as a governor, the first thing I'm going to want to do is push for our state to support a balanced budget amendment and term limits, and get together with 38 or 39 other states to say the same thing, and then we'll fix Washington for good.
But specifically, I mean, I think the one thing that they run into a lot is when you try to touch entitlements, you hit that third rail, and you got the AARP, and you got all these voting blocks that you can't defend. I mean, I just don't, we talk about this all the time, but how do you get it done? Like, what do you touch? If you're gonna, like, let's broaden it out to the whole country, because this show's gonna be watched by the whole country for a second. What do you do? I mean, if you're sitting in Washington, how do you fix that? I mean, they're gonna shove you out.
Well, there's a think tank in Washington called the Center for Responsible Government, and they actually put on a chart where I worked with a bipartisan group of members when I was there, where you could actually push buttons and cut this and cut this. Yeah. The problem is it's tough, because if you cut this, you might lose your job.
Right.
The problem is people are going to have to lose their job in many cases to fix things, and people don't want to do that. People don't want to do it. Right. But you're right. When I was there, and even currently, you're only bringing in $3.5 trillion. You should only be spending $3.5 trillion. We're spending $5.5, $6 trillion, and we think this is great. And we think we can keep printing money. No. And when we had extra money, we sent it to the states, who were also failing. And now we got Ohio, who had all this extra money, and they're spending it like they have it. Yeah. Well, at some point in time, it's all of our money. Yeah. And we're going to have to pay it back. But you know the sad thing is? There's not one person in this audience that's going to pay it back. It's going to be our children, and it's going to be our grandchildren. Mm-hmm. That's the problem. That's the problem. And
it's not even before the debt's up. That's one thing. You're already, the cost of it's in inflation as well. I mean, that's right. Why we're getting hit with all this, because we printed all this money we didn't have. Money's worth less. It's as simple as that. I want to talk about, we just talked about him for a second, Elon Musk, the Tesla CEO, SpaceX, always been a very fascinating person to watch. He's made this bid to buy Twitter. We're watching this drama unfold. We saw, all of these different characters come into play here, and Jack Dorsey now seems like he's maybe supporting Elon Musk in this bid, the guy that created the social media site. How serious is the threat to free speech in this country? I mean, I think you cannot, I mean, for me personally, as somebody in the news business, I can tell you guys that Twitter, even though most of you may not be on it, it is tremendously important as a resource for information, and it's just a place where a lot of, I think, the dialogue occurs. And if that dialogue cannot happen, to me, it's just extremely dangerous.
Well, look, you know what's great is to get billionaires stepping back in the arena. The reason Democrats have been able to shift the woke atmosphere in this country is because billionaires have done it. Yeah. Democrat billionaires. And I think what we need now is the Republican billionaires to step into the game, and that's why I applaud what he's doing, to get us back to a point where free speech is protected. And we need to make sure that happens. Look, I even get it. I mean, my Twitter account, my Facebook account, they're all verified, which means I can say almost anything I want, but they still pull stuff off.
Well, they'll shadow ban you, too. Yeah, they shadow ban me all the time. You get a tweet and nobody saw it. Like, what happened to the tweet?
Right. And it's ridiculous because, you build up a verified account and then they're still hitting you. Yeah. They won't pull me down, but they do shadow ban me.
Of course.
And I think those are the kind of things that should not be allowed. But until we get the billionaires stepping in and saying we're not going to let this happen, we're going to have that. So I'm glad to see he's doing it. I hope others do it. And I think the platform, the biggest problem is, these platforms were built with a lot less value early on, and now it's so tough to build these platforms out. And I hope we can get more platforms out there. I hope we can get ones that can stay and survive. But in the end, we need to fix those that are already out there and stop the fight to take away our First Amendment.
And I mean, when I look at what the Democrat Party, what I think they're trying to construct is almost like an oligarchy, where they're trying to get all of these massive corporations in with them, so they can say, you are all, okay, we're all in this together now. You are all on our side. And they want to almost just push conservatism and the Republicans out onto an island where they're just isolated. And it's like, well, all of your major corporations and everything is being pumped into you every day through your television, through your phone, is all run by one party, and you can only say things that they agree with. I really feel like that's a big threat to this country. And I don't think it's something that a lot of people on the surface really realize. But when you see these massive companies like Delta and Disney pushing a woke agenda, what the hell do you care about, trans issues? You're an airline, you're a Pepsi company. What could you possibly care about this? They're creating this monster that's going to be really hard for Republicans to compete with.
Well, the interesting thing is 67% of our economy is built on small business. Yeah. And they're not getting a say in the game. It's the big businesses that are doing this. And I agree with you. We got to protect our small business. We got to protect their First Amendment rights. But we got to protect them against governors that actually try and take away their rights too. And there are so many problems in this country. It's one of the reasons why I'm running.
Scary.
I mean, it really is scary. And I worry about our children and our grandchildren. My goodness, what are we going to give them if we don't step up and fight? Yeah. I could be down in Florida right now in a free state. Yeah. And you asked that earlier. But my wife and I could have spent January, February, March down there in the cold weather. But you know what? I'm in here fighting for everybody's children and grandchildren.
We got Charlie Kalani. Go ahead, Charlie.
Hey, Mr. Renacci. My name's Charlie Kalani. I live in Highland Heights. Family's got an automotive repair garage in Lakewood, both in Cuyahoga County, by the way. As you said earlier, in 2019, the Dayton shooting took place. Despite running and being elected as a Republican, Governor DeWine immediately attacked the Second Amendment, showing strong support for red flag laws and for universal background checks. What is your stance on these issues, and how do you plan on protecting the Second Amendment rights of Ohioans?
Sure. Well, look, I lived in Washington, D.C. for 8 years. I can tell you that my staff used to come in and say, I got robbed last night. I had a gun put in my neck. Those are gun-free zones, by the way. That Washington, D.C. is a gun-free zone. Let's not forget we also had a United States congressman shot in a gun-free zone. Bad guys get guns. What we got to do is make sure we protect good guys with guns. That's got to be the key. I mean, I chuckle because what's interesting is we got a governor who, back then the primary was 3 years off, and he was saying, hey, I want to make everyone happy, so I'm going to do the red flag laws. He didn't stay with his convictions. This governor doesn't do it. It's one of the things that drives me crazy, how he gets back in all the time when he's not a person with convictions. What I would say is I'm going to make sure that I protect those good people that carry guns, but at the same time, look, we got to make sure that the bad guys get taken off the street as well. And that's got to be a key. So we can't take away the Second Amendment rights. This is something that we have. I'll say it. I'll always stand behind it. I carry a gun. I have it on me right now. Don't worry. I normally have a gun on me all the time. So would you rather have a governor who talks about it, or a governor who's going to walk in to the Capitol, the state Capitol, with his gun on?
Yeah. And the agenda, I think, is pretty clear. I mean, when you look at what they really want to do, they want to disarm the entire country, because if they kind of work around the edges to try and soften up what their agenda is. But then you can clearly look at, I live in New York City. I could never get a pistol in New York City. I mean, the process is basically impossible for me to carry a legal gun, and yet they're everywhere. They are everywhere. There's shootings. I mean, you go into the Bronx, you go into central Brooklyn, it's all the time. The guns are there. They're always going to be there unless you set up the military to go out and search through every home in America. I mean, there's 300 million guns in this country. So until you get rid of all of them, you're always going to have a problem with shootings. It's about managing, and it's about protecting people, and it's about getting the wrong people that shouldn't have guns. It's about throwing them in jail, which is exactly the opposite of what they're trying to do right now. I mean, you have all of these prosecutors across the country that are working as hard as they can to entice people to commit more crime. Right. Which is one of the scariest things I've seen.
Well, and I was going to say, we just wanted to add one other thing. Biden's going to be trying to take your guns down the road. Remember, you got a Biden administration that's going to continue. You better have a governor who says, no way, no how. You are not taking our guns. Get out of our life, federal government. Ohio's going to stand strong.
And I want to ask you one question about Governor DeWine, because we've talked about him all night tonight, and I do wish he was here to defend himself. If he were to win this primary, do you support him?
Well, look, I'm always going to look at who's the most conservative Republican in the race. And if he is that person, I would support him. I understand there's other Republicans getting in the race in the independents, so I'm going to look and see who's there. But I do think it's important to make that decision. But the easier decision is I'm definitely going to support myself after I win on May 3rd.
Can you give us... I know candidates hate talking about internal polling and how it's all looking, but I always ask anyway. How are the numbers looking right now? I mean, we're 2 weeks out.
So here's what's interesting. You know, you do polls and they judge 1,000 people, 1,500 people. I just saw a poll come out that said there were 1,500 people. I'll tell you the poll that I like. We have a company that's making phone calls. We have called the 950,000 anticipated voters 7 or 8 times. We've made 8 or 9 million calls. And when we get to a live call, we ask them 2 questions. Number 1, who are you voting for? Renacci, DeWine, one of the other candidates, or are you undecided? And the second question is, what's the most important thing in Ohio? What's the biggest issue for you in Ohio? And I can tell you that we got 240-some thousand people answer. And in that poll, we're beating Mike DeWine by 6 or 7 points. So that's the poll that's most important, because when you go to a poll with just, I still chuckle, because we're getting a hold of 240,000 people out of, there's 600-some thousand aren't answering the question. Well, you better believe when those pollsters are calling, those 600,000 aren't answering the question either. So the 1,000 or the 1,500 are the 240,000 that we're polling. So we really believe that the momentum was with us. And as I've said before, if Governor DeWine thought he was winning, he wouldn't have went up on TV with almost $4 million. So he's all in to try and save himself.
Oh, yeah.
And
he's vulnerable. This is, I mean, he's obviously operating as a moderate, or maybe even, I mean, you claim he's left of center on these issues. The primaries are when these guys get smoked.
Well, what's really interesting here is that Governor DeWine can't get above 40%, which means 60% of Republicans. 35% have said in our actual polls, which were 800 people, and it's starting to pan out, 35% of Republicans said they will never vote for him again. So that's a real problem.
But here's a question for you. WKSU has called your campaign a far-right campaign.
Yeah.
So I think, and I'm sure you knew that. First off, do you consider yourself a far-right campaign? And second of all, will you have a broad enough appeal to win a general election? I mean, obviously, you're better suited in a primary because it's only Republicans. Broaden it out to the whole, I mean, this is a purple state.
Well, here's what I tell everybody. I don't care whether you're Republican, Democrat, or Independent. If you come up with a plan that makes Ohio one of the top 10 states in the country, that makes it great for our families, for our children, for our grandchildren to stay here, live here, build a business, grow, and never leave Ohio, that's a Republican idea, that's an Independent idea, and that's a Democrat idea, and that's my plan. So I can tell you that in the end, I still believe if people look at my record, I'm going to let the Democrats in the door. I'm going to let the independents in the door. I'm going to let the Republicans in the door. I'm never going to give up my principles and values. But at the same time, I'm going to come up with a plan together. First thing I want to do is sit down with the House and Senate and spend the first 50, 60 days coming up with a plan. You know, one of the things that always drove me crazy about Washington, I used to say, if you could just give me a little pebble so that my pebble would be on the beach, I'd feel like I was part of the beach. But the problem was leadership in Washington never even allowed that pebble.
Right.
They would just say, well, this is the way it is. I want to make sure everybody has an opportunity. I'm not going to be a governor who just sits in Columbus. I want to be a governor who gets out every day and travels like I'm doing today and listens to the people. I don't care whether they're independents, Democrats, Republicans. It's about Ohioans.
I got 3 really fast questions. We're in our final minute here. The first one, Bengals or Browns, Reds or Indians?
Well, look.
Guardians.
I love the Bengals now because they're winning. I would also like to see the Browns win.
That's a good answer.
I was an Indians season ticket holder for 17 years. So I'm going to stick. But again, they're not the Indians anymore, so maybe I don't like them anymore because now they're the Guardians.
I got 2 more quick questions. Weirdest thing about yourself?
Boy, that's an interesting question. Maybe I'd ask my wife that question. I don't know. I would.
All right. Fair enough. That's a tough one. When the aliens invade, what's your first move? What are you going to do?
I've always learned that you run toward the target. So I'm going to
You're
run.
going
I'm
right
going to
at
run at them. I'm going to
Okay.
run at them.
Okay.
All right, because I'd rather make sure we get rid of them first. So when the aliens, I want everybody running with me too, though. I don't want to look back and me be the only one.
You're not
there.
going alone.
No.
Understood. All right. Jim Renacci.
Thank you all.
Sir, thank you so much for taking the time.
Appreciate it.
Yes, we do appreciate it. Thank you to all of our guests for speaking. Thank you to Mr. Jim Renacci for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
And primary day in Ohio is May 3rd. Have a good night.